Alex Ryder felt like a lab rat, trapped in a cage of his own making. The sterile white walls of the CIA facility seemed to close in on him, each blink of the fluorescent lights a hammer blow to his already frayed nerves. He was no stranger to the world of espionage, having spent years navigating its murky depths. But this was different. This felt wrong. Ryder's mission was simple: retrieve classified files from a secure server known only as Section 27. In and out, a ghost in the machine. But the moment he stepped foot in the facility, a cold dread gripped him. It clung to him like a shroud, whispering of unseen horrors lurking beneath the surface of this supposed bastion of national security. He pushed those thoughts aside, clinging to his training, his logic. The facility was state-of-the-art, a marvel of technology and security, yet the silence was unnerving, broken only by the hum of machinery and the distant echo of his own footsteps. There was an underlying tension, a sense of something deeply, terribly wrong that he couldn't quite place. It pulsed beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. Each step toward Section 27 felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. His gut screamed at him to turn back, but his orders were clear. He was a soldier, trained to follow orders, to push aside fear and doubt. But this mission, it was different. It felt personal, like he was walking into the jaws of a beast that knew his name. The air grew colder as he approached the steel door, a stark contrast to the controlled climate of the facility. His breath condensed in front of him, a ghostly exhale in the oppressive silence. A shiver ran down his spine, and for a moment he could have sworn he heard a whisper, faint and chilling, just beyond the threshold of his hearing. He shook his head, attributing it to his growing anxiety. He was letting the atmosphere get to him, he told himself. There was a logical explanation for everything. But deep down, a primal fear coiled in his stomach. This mission was a trap. He could feel it in his bones, but a trap set for whom, and why? The door hissed open, revealing a small, darkened room. A single terminal sat in the center, bathed in the eerie glow of its own screen. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like the scent of blood. He stepped inside, his hand instinctively hovering over the holstered pistol at his hip. "Show me what you've got," he whispered into the darkness, his voice tight with apprehension. As if in answer, a soft whisper slithered from the shadows, barely audible. It sent a chill down his spine, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. He spun around, searching for the source, his heart pounding in his chest. But there was nothing there, just the hum of the computer and the oppressive silence pressing in on him from all sides. He approached the terminal cautiously, his senses on high alert. The screen flickered to life, displaying a simple prompt enter access code. He keyed in the sequence he had memorized, his fingers trembling slightly. A list of files appeared, each one more cryptic than the last. He scanned the list, his eyes searching for the file he was looking for. Evolve 11. There it was, Evolve 11. He clicked on the file, his pulse quickening. The screen flickered again, this time displaying a series of disturbing images. Each one was more grotesque than the last twisted figures, faces contorted in silent screams, and eyes, so many eyes, staring back at him from the darkness. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him, the images burning themselves into his mind. He tried to look away, to tear his gaze from the screen, but it was no use. The images held him captive, their horror seeping into his consciousness. A low groan escaped his lips, a primal sound of fear and revulsion. This was wrong. This was all wrong. He slammed the laptop shut, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had to get out of there, had to report this. But as he turned to leave, a new sound reached his ears, a scratching, scraping sound coming from within the walls. It was faint at first, but it grew steadily louder, more insistent, as if something was trying to claw its way out. Panic welled up inside him, threatening to consume him. He was trapped like an animal in a cage. The room seemed to shrink around him, the walls closing in. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, accompanied now by a low, guttural growl that seemed to shake the very foundation of the facility. His hand instinctively went to his weapon, his finger hovering over the trigger. He backed away from the walls, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape, an explanation. But there was nothing. Just the relentless scratching, the growling, and the growing sense of dread that threatened to suffocate him. He was losing it, he realized. This place, whatever it was getting to him, burrowing its way into his mind. He took a deep breath, trying to regain control. He had to focus, had to think. There had to be a logical explanation for all of this. It was just a building, just a computer program. It couldn't hurt him. But even as he told himself this, he knew, deep down, that he was lying. Something was terribly wrong, something beyond his understanding, and it was closing in. The room began to shake violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling as cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. The terminal flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. He stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath catching in his throat. The scratching and growling had reached a fever pitch, a cacophony of sound that seemed to split his skull open. He had to get out, had to escape before the room collapsed in on itself. He threw himself against the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was sealed shut, his way out blocked. He was trapped, entombed within this nightmare. Panic surged through him, hot and blinding. He pounded on the door, his fists making dull thuds against the metal. He screamed for help, his voice raw and ragged, but his cries were swallowed by the chaos. Despair threatened to overwhelm him. He was going to die here, buried alive in this concrete coffin. Then, with a deafening roar, the wall opposite him exploded inward. Debris rained down upon him as he shielded his head with his arms. When the dust settled, he saw it. A long, narrow hallway stretched out before him, lit by a sickly yellow light emanating from an unseen source. It pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed along the walls. He didn't hesitate. He didn't think. He just ran. He ran towards the light, towards the promise of escape, even as a new wave of terror washed over him. For lining the walls of the hallway, staring at him with cold, dead eyes, were rows upon rows of human figures. Their faces were pale and gaunt, their bodies emaciated, their skins stretched taut over bones. They were like living skeletons, their eyes burning with an unholy light. And then he saw it. Spreading out from beneath the figures, a thick, viscous liquid oozed across the floor, its surface bubbling and churning. It was a deep, tar-like black, and it emitted a foul, pungent odor that stung his nostrils and made his eyes water. He recognized the smell. He had smelled it before. In the room with the terminal, it was the smell of blood. As he ran, he realized with growing horror that the figures were moving. Their heads turned to follow his progress, their eyes burning into him, their skeletal fingers twitching. The tar-like liquid pulsed and flowed around his feet, trying to ensnare him, to drag him down into its depths. He stumbled and fell, his hands sinking into the viscous ooze. He cried out in disgust as it clung to him, its touch cold and slimy. He struggled to his feet, kicking and screaming, but it was no use. The liquid was everywhere, surrounding him, pulling him down. He looked back over his shoulder and saw that the figures were closing in, their eyes glowing brighter, their grins widening into grotesque, inhuman smiles. He was trapped, with no escape, no hope of rescue, and then he heard it. A voice deep within his mind speaking to him, whispering his name. It was a seductive voice, promising him power, knowledge, and an end to his suffering. All he had to do was surrender, let go, become one with them. Alex Ryder was never seen again. The official report stated he had gone rogue, disappearing with classified information. But the truth was far more sinister. In that secret facility, something dark and ancient had awakened, something that fed on fear and despair. Alex Ryder had become its latest victim, his essence twisted to serve its purpose. The whispers, the shadows, the ooze, all aspects of something vast and terrible, something dormant for centuries, now awake and hungry. The facility remained operational, a breeding ground for nightmares. The legacy of Alex Ryder lived on in terrified whispers. The horror had only just begun.